the more I look into politics, the more I'm inclined to talk to you about them. But I need to talk to you about politics. I need to talk to you about what's going on today. So I want to affirm very clearly, publicly, that this ministry supports the heartbeat laws that are being passed in the states, and in particular the state of Alabama, which state has come under a severe attack. Let me synopsize it for those of you that don't have the time or are not inclined to read the news, or read about the news or watch videos on YouTube. Let me remind you that as a son of God, certainly a son of man, but as a son of God, we are supposed to be involved in politics. We're supposed to know what's going on, and we're supposed to be praying about acquiring the opinion of God. So I will give you a synopsis of my understanding of what's going on, and I will give you my opinion. And then you have to pray and get your opinion. You have to get it from the Lord yourself. Now, this is a real challenge, and I'm in danger of people calling me a cult leader, but I'm going to tell you the truth anyway. We're supposed to wind up with the same opinion. Not because I tell you what to think, or not because I'm controlling you, okay? But because everyone should have the opinion of God. Mm-hmm. So if we all have the opinion of God, we should all be pretty much agreeing with the basic principles of right and wrong, of morality and immorality. We might vary in our opinions about whether or not we agree with a particular doctrine or a particular political doctrine or a particular way that someone's going about. I mean, ideally, we would. I don't even know. Well, how am I going to say that? Is God that specific? Well, maybe He isn't that specific for me, but maybe I'm just not spiritual enough yet to hear from Him on these little details of particular areas. You know, was that God? Was that not God? But I do hear from Him. I believe I can discern His Spirit on the major issues. I can discern His Spirit on people. I can discern whether He would agree with a particular policy or not, whether it's moral according to the morality of God on the major issues. You know, so we can disagree on whether or not, you know, some little things. I can't think of an example right now. Okay, so what is going on? Why is all of a sudden the abortion issue raging in the country again? Because it's been really dead. You know, going back in the 60s, maybe the 70s, the Catholic Church in particular was very active in fighting abortion. They used to go on talk shows. Which were pitiful because the people that were pro-choice were much better equipped to debate than the usually average housewife that went up there on the talk shows, you know, to debate. They weren't equipped properly. But anyway, all of that died, you know. You don't hear any debates anymore. It's very rare that you will hear about a protest. The courts came against the organized protests, made, I don't know what they called it, abortion-free zones, for lack of a better word. The abortion protesters couldn't get close to the abortion clinic. They were not allowed to hold up pictures of the fetus. They were not allowed to talk to the women going in. So the pro-choice lobby pretty much chewed up the pro-life lobby, pretty much so. And everything just got very quiet. And sexual immorality, and I'm including abortion and sexual immorality, just blossomed in America, unfortunately. And of course, Roe versus Wade. And what is Roe versus Wade? Just in case you have heard those words and you don't know what that means. Brethren, we have a constitution in this country. We are a nation of laws, and the law of the nation is the Constitution. The Constitution says that we are an organization of states, and each state has its own governmental authority. And within the states, cities and districts have their own constitutions and their own authority. Okay? we are a union, okay? We are a union of, did I say organization? We are a union of states. And of recent, for the last 100 years or so, in my opinion, the federal government has become very aggressive towards the government of the states in violation of the Constitution. There are certain privileges and certain rights that the states have and certain authority that the federal government has, and the federal government has very little authority. The whole intention, or whole idea being that government almost always corrupts, that absolute power corrupts absolutely, that's the saying. So the founding fathers wanted to give the federal government as little power as possible. Their power basically was, they didn't even have much authority for a military, just a very small military at the beginning, when necessary for the defense of the nation. There was no taxation right. So the biggest challenge to the states' rights, what is called states' rights, okay, was the Civil War, when the federal government moved in and said, you cannot have slavery. But it was much more than that. It was also, the issue was slavery, the issue was economic. But I'm not going to get into the Civil War right now. But anyway, that was as far as I know, and I'm no historian, this is a lay person sharing my understanding with you, that the federal government started to acquire a power over the states that's not written into the Constitution. And something happened in this country that is illegal under the Constitution. We wound up being ruled by an oligarchy, okay, of 9 people on the Supreme Court. The 9 people on the Supreme Court acquired somewhere along the line the power to overrule the states, the legislative branch, and the executive branch of the government. Nine unelected people are the oligarchic power of this nation today. And that really has to change. But so many things have to change. But that's the situation right now. So, the Supreme Court justices are elected for life. The president appoints them, and I believe it's the Senate that approves them. So depending on whether the president is liberal or conservative, or it used to be Republican, Democrat, it's not Republican, Democrat anymore. It's not even conservative, liberal anymore, it's globalist or nationalist today. But depending on the political beliefs of the president, he would appoint a justice. Now, he wasn't supposed to do that, okay? They're supposed to be appointing jurists. They're supposed to be appointing legal scholars who are above politics, who will interpret the Constitution according to the law of the land. But politics crept in, and liberal justices have been appointed who didn't rule according to the Constitution. And we have several major decisions that have overreached on the rights of the states to the point that right now we're in a bloodless civil war between the states and the federal government. War is raging on so many, bloodless war, non-shooting war is raging on multiple levels in this country. Pretty much some people are saying the last line of defense are the governors who will stand against the federal government. But of course President Trump has appointed, and there have been actually appointed to the Supreme Court, 2 conservative justices, which has changed everything. I'm trying to make this simple. I hope I'm not leaving too much out for those of you that are not familiar with this at all. So while they say we now have a majority on the Supreme Court, but I don't really know about that because, in my humble opinion, Justice Roberts is a globalist and totally untrustworthy and needs to be impeached. But depending on what the issue is, there still is a majority on the Supreme Court. Although Ruth Bader Ginsburg is amongst the living, is not amongst the living, there has been no proof of life of her for several months now. And they're keeping, I believe she's dead, they're keeping her death a secret until after the election, because the next president, the president that's elected in 2020, will have to replace her. And that will really give us a conservative Supreme Court. So, with regard to the issue today, which is the heartbeat laws of the states, what's happening is that I think it was about 60 years ago, I may have my number wrong, 9 people, although it wasn't 9, it was the majority, I don't know exactly what the ratio was, the pro and con votes were, but this body of 9 people, a majority of this body of 9 people decided to overthrow the rights of many states. I don't know how many states, there were many states that had anti-abortion laws that criminalized abortion, many states, okay? Although not all of them, but many of them. And this oligarchy, what is an oligarchy? It's ruled by a few, okay? Monarchy ruled by one, okay? Oligarchy ruled by a few. So they passed they had an opinion, the Supreme Court handed down an opinion in the case of Roe versus Wade. In other words, someone came to the Supreme Court and said, we want to make it a federal law that every state must offer abortion. And every doctor, you cannot refuse, doctors and nurses, you cannot refuse to give an abortion to a woman that wants an abortion. And by that decision, the laws, the state governments were completely overthrown. And the state, see, we have a representative government in this country. So a state legislature that passes a law, that a pro-life law, that is supposed to mean that the people of that state do not want abortion in their state. And we have the same thing in the federal government, although the federal, all of the government is the representative government is dead in this country, but it's showing some signs of life in a few places. But that's the way it's supposed to be. So, for example, the people of the state of Alabama do not want abortion being practiced in their state. And a body of 9 people, although a majority of the body of 9 people have said, you cannot do that. You have to give an abortion if someone wants it. And this was a radical change to this nation. It was, I don't know if it was the beginning, but it was involved in the beginning of our moral slide downward, for which, if things don't change, the Lord's going to destroy this nation. But I believe things will change. But he would destroy us, just like he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and don't think for a second that he won't, or that he wouldn't. Okay. So Roe versus Wade is a legal decision that was handed down by the Supreme Court that stripped the states of their rights to criminalize abortion. And there has been a war going on in this country ever since, the pro-choice people trying to overthrow that Supreme Court decision. And they failed every time. So abortion is legal, or was legal, until this year, or until maybe last year or this year, in every state of the nation, according to the ruling of the federal government, based upon a decision of the Supreme Court. People were being forced. Every day citizens were losing their right to have something to say about their own neighborhoods. And this is going on all over the country today in many different areas. I know there were many states that rejected gay marriage, and they were overridden by Supreme Court decisions. So it's what's happened is very illegal. The problem is, once it's happened, it's happened. So even if you turn it around, everything that has happened has still happened. You know, culture has been changed. The new generation coming up has been changed. But that's another issue. So President Trump has succeeded in placing 2 conservative justices on the Supreme Court, which has changed the atmosphere of the court. which is now largely conservative. So conservative persons, pro-choice, anti-abortion forces or pro-life forces in many states are getting ready to overthrow that federal decision. And it's actually the governors, in some instances, that are suing the federal court for overreaching on their rights to legislate how their state would be run. So because now it is anticipated that it's just a matter of time until Roe versus Wade is overthrown. It's still the law of the land, see, that you should be able to go into to any doctor and demand an abortion. Now, there are variations of that. There are some states right now. Well, let me say it to you this way. At least when it first started, you could have an exemption on religious beliefs if you were a doctor or a nurse and you didn't want to participate in an abortion. You could say, I don't want to do that, and someone else would do it. But now they're trying to force you to do it. Well, who was trying to force you to do it? Federal regulations. Federal regulations are moving forward with this wicked agenda, even with President Trump in the White House, trying to force people, to deny people the right of conscience and force them to perform abortions, to perform gay marriages, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? They're overriding the individual's right of conscience. Could you turn that fan on, please? Yeah, please, thank you. But in anticipation of the Roe versus Wade being overturned, because we now have a conservative Supreme Court, and I think many of us expect President Trump to be reelected, and then he will definitely appoint another conservative justice, and that will do it for sure. And not only that, but just as an aside, we'll see what happens. We waited for 2 years for prosecutions of the political criminals in our country, and many of us were disappointed because nothing has happened so far. But it looks like this Attorney General Barr means business, and it's a real possibility we're going to see political justice for the political criminals. They're treasonous, in my opinion. Okay? Many have committed treason. We will know for sure when they're found guilty by a jury of their peers. So if in fact Attorney General Barr goes forward and prosecutes the political criminals, which include President Obama, if President Obama is found guilty of treason, every justice that he appointed to the Supreme Court will no longer be legally appointed. Everything that he's ever signed will no longer be valid. So the country is in the most exciting crisis. I'm no historian, I'm very much a layperson, but to me, it's the most exciting crisis that I know about or ever heard about in political history. Of course, we are a country that is unique. Our government is unique. And the crisis, it's the greatest constitutional crisis of this country. So it has to be unique because our government is unique. We're going to see if it works. Will the Constitution hold? Okay. Will it hold? That's the issue. So, we now have a conservative Supreme Court, which means when the Roe versus Wade decision is tested, when it's challenged, when an Attorney General is going to be, I think there are 10 of them so far, it'll be I don't know if they'll call it a class action or not, I don't know about that, but so far there are 10 attorneys general that I think they're actually already suing. They've sued the federal government on Obamacare. I don't really know about abortion right now. If they actually, I think they've just passed the heartbeat laws in their states, but there's no suit yet before the Supreme Court. Or whether they will sue collectively or not, I don't know. So the states that do not want abortion, the pro-life states, looking to the future and seeing that Roe versus Wade is about to be overturned, it's just a matter of time until it's overturned. They are passing state laws criminalizing abortion because the the heavy-handedness of the federal government that has prevented them from doing that is a lame duck. It's about to be overthrown. In other words, Alabama passed a law criminalizing abortion, and if they convict somebody, if they convict a doctor for performing an abortion, and that doctor wants to take the case to the Supreme Court, he will lose. So even though to their political and spiritual positions, it's very anti-American, very anti-constitutional. They want the states locked down, and they want to force institutions and people and government and hospitals and doctors to kill babies. They want to force them to do it. And this is there's a big war raging. This is a major aspect of the overall, this is a major battle of the overall war that is being waged. So the way these laws are being written is this, that from the minute the baby's heartbeat can be heard, that is now a person, and it is illegal to abort that child, which is the murder of the child. They're calling it a child. As soon as there's a heartbeat, they're calling it the murder of the child. And the Alabama law seems to be special because, as I haven't read it, I wouldn't even want to, but I just read about it. I read about it, that apparently the law is written in such a manner that it's designed for a Supreme Court challenge. It's designed, the law is going to be tested. Someone's going to take it. Is going to take the state of Alabama before the Supreme Court. They're going to test this law by taking it before the Supreme Court. And this law was specifically written for that purpose, knowing that it's coming. In other words, saying, come on. Okay, come on. That's what they're saying. So people are crying out against all of these heartbeat laws, which say from the minute you can discern a heartbeat, that abortion is criminal. Some people say you can hear the heartbeat at 6 weeks, but many say, well, I personally believe that life begins at conception. I believe life begins at conception, that the soul enters in at conception. So Alabama is under a severe attack, and I want to point out to you there's such mind control going on today that the only way you're going to survive it is to know the truth, which means that you have to put in some time studying these issues, or you're going to be knocked over by their lies and the spiritual power behind their lies. So, what is the governor of Alabama? Her name is Governor Ivy. She looks like a mature woman. I would say she's in her 60s or 70s. God bless her, she's in there. You know? And she was signing that law. And now she's under a personal attack. She's being called a hypocrite. Why is she being called a hypocrite? I said to myself, why is she being called a hypocrite? You have to ask yourself why someone's being called a hypocrite instead of going around and repeating it like a parrot and saying she's a hypocrite. Why are you calling her a hypocrite? Well, she wants to criminalize the murder of babies, but she is pro-death penalty. So she won't let you kill the babies, but she's killing the criminals. And don't you see that it's the same thing? It's either the death of a fetus or the death of the criminal. How she's pro-death here and pro-life here, she's a hypocrite. Can you hear the difference? If not, I'll tell you the difference. One is the murder of an innocent life, and the other is the murder of a criminal who may have taken another life. The execution of a criminal is legal in the scripture. The murder of babies, for no reason other than that you don't want them, is not legal in the scripture. And either your mind is twisted, or you are a manipulator and a liar and an evil person who was deliberately set out to confuse ignorant people. It's a form of murder. It's listed as one of the 7 deadly sins, going out, conspiring with others to seek blood, to deliberately deceive ignorant or uneducated people, to agree with your criminal thoughts. God doesn't like that. That is a very serious crime. But there are all kinds of crimes, you know. We make mistakes. There are crimes of passion. But a crime like that, that's the seriousness of the crime of being a con man, you know. To deliberately look for people's weaknesses and use it against them to make them a pawn in your agenda. There's no other word to describe that than evil. I cannot think of any other word to adequately describe it than evil. And that's what's going on in this country today. That kind of evil. Twisting the truth. Twisting the truth and using it as a weapon to achieve your goal. And using the people that believe your lies as a weapon, as a part of your army to achieve your goals. So God bless Governor Ivy. We break all of the curses that are coming against her. And we pray that every lie and untruth that has been said about her should be proven wrong. In Jesus' name.